Welcome to another episode of Strange Planet. Thanks, as always, for sticking me in your ear. You know, I'm old enough to remember some old TV sitcoms like Petticoat Junction. And on Petticoat Junction, they would have characters from another sitcom appear on that sitcom. Like, for example, Green Acres. I'm really dating myself now, but just bear with me. So this this episode of Strange Planet is a little bit like that. Not that this is Petticoat Junction or the Green Acres, but I'm inviting some other podcasters to come on my show, and this way you get to know them, and we all benefit because we sort of labor in the we toil in a similar vineyard. My guests and I, although their podcast is not your grandfather's paranormal podcast. In fact, it's billed as a loose cannon podcast featuring casual conversations with whomever we deem interesting, often on the fringe, like Coast to Coast, but on demand, like a less compromised Joe Rogan experience. I welcome to the program the co-hosts of Grimerica, Darren Grimes and Graham Dunlop. Darren and Graham, welcome. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for having us, Richard. We were listening to you back when we first started. I think we had you on the show years and years ago.
We did. I wanted to start that off by saying a big thank you to Richard because you took a chance with us, fledgling little podcast. I think you were like episode 14, almost 10 years ago. And you gave us a chance, and like people like yourselves really helped us like have a great start in the podcasting realm. And we really appreciate it.
Oh, wow. And how many episodes is Grimerica up to now?
About 600 in the normal feed. And then we have a separate show that's got about 160, I think.
That's Grimerica Outlawed, the second show?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a spin-off.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just give folks a little portrait of who you guys are. Darren is host, engineer, and editor of Grimerica. And Darren spent his formative years raised by his mother in northern Ontario. I spent a lot of time in my youth north of Superior. Darren spent his early adulthood working in the steel industry, eventually landing him in Calgary, Alberta. And during this time, Darren and his friend Graham Dunlop started the Grimerica Podcast, an interview podcast about all things they and their podcast community find interesting, which helped lead him to many, many rabbit holes. And today, Darren raises two young daughters in Alberta, working as a podcast host, author, and entrepreneur. Graham Dunlop is host, producer, and writer. Graham's primary passions are podcasting, researching, and helping others. He's obsessed with learning and self-improvement. And Graham and Darren again started the Grimerica Podcast in 2013. Their show has continued to grow into a sizable and loving community. Most recently, he's pursued a spin-off podcast called Grimerica Outlawed and has narrated various audiobooks. You do something very interesting. You do trips and events and like podcasts that lasts the entire weekend. Tell me about this. This is a rather novel approach.
Well, yeah, I don't know how, I guess people started calling it a podcast, but it was really more of kind of like a micro conference. And with the money is saved from not having to bring in because we've seen those big ones like Paradigm Symposium kind of come in and try and do it and have trouble because you're paying all these guys expenses and whatever their fee is. And I think, man, that one Paradigm Symposium probably had $100,000 or close to just in getting people there. And for that kind of money, you could take Randall Carlson and a couple people and go just about any place in the world. So we kind of, fell into... We had started, I guess it kind of started as meetups for our podcast. That's what the first couple events were just straight meetups with people that listened to the show. And then it wasn't really sustainable. It was expensive. It was a lot of traveling and explaining to the family that you're going to spend a bunch of money and travel to go hang out with friends you made from the podcast that you're already spending a bunch of time on. And, and we weren't making any money back then. So all this was out of pocket. And we had talked to Randall and done this like little tour. We had missed Randall actually. So we had we had hung out with Randall a bunch, but we had gone down to the Washington Scablands, missed Randall by a couple hours, but his associate Brad was still there. And he showed us around all the stuff that Randall Carlson's been on Joe Rogan now multiple times talking about and sort of made famous. But back then, we were just getting started. So we talked to Randall about getting together and doing this event down in Colorado, where we would sell tickets, basically, some camps, rent a giant Airbnb ranch and sell out all the bedrooms and get some cooks in to cook. And the first one was kind of pretty cut and paste and hacked together, but we got through it, and everyone, we didn't get any real bad reviews. Everyone had a great time, and we were able to spin that into. We've been doing multiple events with Randall. Of course, we do the Scablands tours with him. Both the Scablands tours, we're getting ready to add a third Randall Carlson Scablands tour, which will start down to the Portland area and do the Columbia River Gorge and all that. But we've been doing tours annually, 2 tours annually with Randall Carlson, and then we added in a canyon event down in Utah with Dave Matheson and Brandon Powell, where we do a bunch of Wim Hof stuff up on the mountain, and then go check out the 2 canyons and check out the stars at Bryce Canyon at night. And do what we actually have. That one's coming up in like 3 weeks or 4 weeks here. It's April 20th. We have that. There is still some availability on that. So we have a time. We go out to Bryce Canyon, which I think like the number 5 place in the world for viewing the stars. We go out there. We watch the sunset. We have the Dave Matheson, of course, is the star guy. So he knows all the constellation. He shows us all those, and he tells us the mythology behind them all. And then we added a magic event, which we do. And then we've added a Canadian winter event up here where we do some Wim Hof stuff, and we're getting ready to add a Mojave desert exploration event. And like I said, we had the Randall Carlson third tour that we're looking at adding next year as well. We've got an eclipse event coming up in Texas in 2024. I mean, it took us to Egypt already, and it looks like South America might be on the docket. It really has been quite the adventure of, like I say, it's kind of like a micro tour, but it's on location. So instead of getting Randall and 10 other people and going to a hotel, we'll find a resort that's real close to all the Scabland stuff that he's talking about, and we'll stay there, and we'll rent some vans, and we'll feed you, and we'll take you out every day, and Randall will show you the sites that he's talking about, and we'll go back and he'll do some presentations and stuff like that. So we've got actually another one of those coming up in right away here too in 2 months, in May 15th to 20th in Soap Lake, Washington. We've got that event. I know we sold another ticket today. So that's the thing about these events, is we're not looking to sell hundreds of tickets. Like, I think our Soap Lake event will max out at 35 people, maybe 40. I mean, we're looking at ways we can maybe flex that up to 40, but for the most part, none of our events, other than Egypt, which wasn't our event, it was a collaboration. But none of our events are ever really more than 40 attendees. And then we'll have usually 8 to 10 people there to host and take care of and feed those attendees.
Wow. And the reason why I call it like a podcast is because it's a bunch of great conversations happening, and the guest or whoever sort of is like the special sort of presenter or guest, you get to hang out with them all weekend too, or all week, for example.
I feel like such a slacker now. I just sit here and do everything in my studio. I barely get out of the house except to buy some milk. You guys are off the far-flung corners of Egypt. And okay, so you threw out some names there. Wim Hof, who I interviewed many, many years ago, the Iceman, who has this incredible ability to, I guess, control his, what do they call that? The autonomic nervous system, right? So he can control his heart rate, his blood pressure, maybe even his internal temperature. He's run marathons in the Arctic in barefoot. He's been submerged in ice water.
Climbed Everest, I think, in his shorts as well.
That's right. So that's Wim Hof. You mentioned Randall Carlson, who's been on with Joe Rogan. I know Randall, his work. I don't think I've ever interviewed him, but it mainly, his thoughts and research into Atlantis. But you mentioned the Washington Scablands. So what's going on there? What are the Washington Scablands, and what are you going to do there?
Well, that's like the remnants. That's the main remnants, the most pronounced sort of geographical remnants of what he calls the Younger Dryas flood, which was like 11,800 years ago, I guess. And so we travel around from this home base in Soap Lake, and we travel to all these different sites that are amazing, like a huge, sandbar, or the dry falls where, he explains kind of what he thinks happened during the Younger Dryas, which is kind of similar to the mainstream, but there's some major differences. Like they think it came from Missoula in Montana, and it kind of came down over many different times. And he thinks there was just one or two main massive floods that happened.
And the Younger Dryas, does he have a theory? Do you have a theory as to what precipitated it? Some say it was like an asteroid strike, some sort of a polar shift. What do you think, or what does he think?
Yeah, he thinks it's a combination of maybe asteroid, and he also has room for the solar theory of Robert Schoch's, like a sort of a CME type thing happening as well. Multiple things possibly, but he's leaning towards I would say the asteroid theory. Yeah.
So when you said like a coronal mass ejection, like a Carrington type event,
I think that's what Robert Schoch, or it might be a little bit different than that. I'm not sure, but I think he supposes that the sun had something to do with it.
And I've been doing a couple of episodes on the Eye of Africa. I had David Edward on, and David Stig Hansen, who's a fascinating guy, but I mean his mind is off in a million directions all at once. I don't know if you've interviewed David. He's been to the Rishak structure twice in just last year. Carlson is not on board with the Eye of Africa as being Atlantis, if I'm remembering correctly, right? He doesn't think that the Eye of Africa was Atlantis.
No, he thinks it's in the Azores, in the mid-Atlantic there. There's a huge ridge there, mid-Atlantic ridge, and he kind of looks at Plato's work and says that between the pillars of Hercules or whatever, and so he thinks it's out there through Gibraltar in the middle of the Atlantic. So it's interesting. I don't really know where I stand on that. I mean, we've also had a guest on that talked about it being in Egypt, like almost like Memphis in a way, or in Egypt. So maybe it was more of a civilization and not a location.
Right. Darren, do you have any? Now, if I'm remembering correctly, Darren, you're more of the, I don't know if skeptic is the right word. Would that be fair to say in this duo that you're the skeptic, kind of the, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
probably
It's
depends
not
on what we're
super hard
talking
to
about.
be the skeptic in this duo, though. But I have a ton of time for Randall's thing. He does a great argument for it being in the Azores with, it going down being extra submerged now because of isostatic depression and stuff like that. But the Egypt argument was pretty good. I mean, it was pretty good. And I've always thought of, when you see the pyramids in Mexico and in Egypt and everything, I've always sort of thought of Atlantis as, if we don't because everyone wants to just fucking take Plato at his word, but I don't know if I can swear. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'll
just have to tick the explicit contact box when I upload to Megaphone. That's all.
I don't, Plato is great, but maybe we don't take him at his word. You could either have Atlantis being maybe all of North America, or like just everything. That's like, today we call ourselves Earth or whatever. I think we call ourselves Earth or the world or the globe. We have a couple different words for it. But if there was a civilization that was running around before, and it seems to be more and more increasing evidence that there was a civilization running around before,
advanced,
then maybe they just called their stuff Atlantis. They called it Atlantis. Earth was called Atlantis.
Right. Or there was the Roman Empire. There was Atlantis.
Yeah, and if it was in North America, it got trashed because, you know, if there's one thing that I've learned traveling the North American landscape is that it got trashed by a whole lot, what would seem to be a whole lot of water at some point in time. So anything that was here, you know, pre 13,000 years ago is gone. It's simply gone. You go look at all the different slot canyons that are 1,000 feet deep in Utah, and you look at Zion Canyon, and you look at Bryce Canyon, and you look at the Washington Scablands, and you look at all these, even the Yellowstone Canyon. I mean, that kind of landscape doesn't exist any place else in the world. And there's a reason for that. It's because a whole ton of water came through, it would seem to be North America. So any civilization that was existing here before that, because I think the ice stopped, you know, right at not far below the Canada USA border, right? Like maybe 200 miles south of the Canada USA border. And all that down there is like temperate forest. The seasons probably aren't nearly as severe as they are now. And so basically from there down is just game on. Who knows what was going on, but it seems like a whole lot. And they were able to do a bunch of miraculous things with stone, not just in North America, you know, and you see the sites in Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt.
All right. Darren Grimes, Graham Dunlop, co-hosts of Grimerica, Grimerica.com. All of the details are in the episode notes. We'll take a quick time out, come back, and delve further into the world as they see it. Stay with us. What would it feel like to reclaim your health, your vitality, to sleep deeply, to live fully, to address health at the root, at the cellular level, so that your body can detect damage where you have it? Imagine living younger, longer, having the energy to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Discomfort fading away. ASEA Redox Supplement harnesses the power of your body to heal itself, giving you the ability to power your potential. This is one of the most profound health, athletic, and anti-aging discoveries of our lifetime, and we need the world to know about it. If you want to learn more about ASEA, visit strangeplanet.teamasea.com, strangeplanet.teamasea.com, and be sure to text or call my colleague and friend Lynn at 443-254-6024, 443-254-6024 to order or for additional information. ASEA Redox Supplement. It's truly wellness redefined. Darren Grimes, Graham Dunlop are the co-hosts, producers, writers, researchers, editors of Grimerica, and its offshoot, its spin-off, Grimerica Outlawed. So let's just talk a little bit about the evolution of Grimerica. Back in 2013, it was what, primarily the paranormal conspiracies, but it's evolved since then. Just kind of walk us through, give us a brief overview of the evolution of Grimerica.
Yeah, it started out with like when we met you back then. I met you at the 2013 UFO Congress. That was a big sort of part of it back then, was UFOs and paranormal mysteries. And we found that listeners really enjoyed telling us their stories. Everybody wanted to be heard, their sightings and their synchronicities and their experiences. And so we kind of incorporated that into the show quite a bit. And that was, you know, that was one of the real reasons why I think we became fairly successful. But then, you know, we got to the more of the, in the age of 20, 18, 19, 20, where things got a little bit more censorious. We started getting censored for reasons why we never thought we would before. You know, we had Del Bigtree on talking about, vaccines before, like in 2017, and we kind of noticed, why are we being censored for this? And so
that was when we just got taken completely off the iTunes charts because we were consistently in the top 25. And I can't remember the category, society and culture, something like that. We're consistently in the top 25 and top 50 for sure. And we had Del Bigtree on it. Boom.
Wow.
We've never cracked the top 100 again.
That was back when there was some discoverability in Apple Podcasts. Like you could actually just go to the podcast thing and you would see that. That seems to have sort of gone away. So, you know, and then when COVID hit and we kind of got, censored a little bit more. And then we started discussing with ourselves, like we started having a struggle with, do we talk about this on our show in the intros? Do we talk about it? Do we not? Do we address it? So we thought we need to start up another show to approach some of these really the more controversial topics. And, our YouTube channel was getting strikes. So we only had, our audio podcast mainly. So we came up with, Grimerica Outlawed as a feed. Like the second half is for subscribers only, kind of like the higher side chat model. And we decided to hit it really hard on some of the more deeper controversial stuff. And we'll keep this brand like Grimerica a little bit lighter into, the mysteries and the paranormal. And of course, there is a huge overlap sometimes as well, but we wanted to put out more content at the same time. So we thought that'd be a good way to do it. So that's really like only on audio. And we put that on Rumble now too, and on Rockfin, but yeah, it's getting a little bit deeper into stuff.
Grimerica Outlawed is. And
yeah.
And now with
I
Grimerica,
mean, in a nutshell, it was to
Yeah.
push back on COVID protocols in Canada fairly hard and around the world, and vaccine mandates. I mean, we just couldn't do that with a regular show. You couldn't say anything about it, or you risk completely losing your brand.
Vitamin D, even we couldn't talk about.
And we were arguing to get amongst each other about how we're going to deal with it, because I was like, well, my argument was we've been at it an awful long time to just get torched off of everything. And Graham's argument, which was, just as good, was that it's like we're living through the conspiracy. We got to say something about it. And so we settled on, well, we'll just start a whole new show. Sure enough, it was kicked off of everything right away, but we did the membership model, and because we already had a bit of standing with our previous show, we were able to get a few hundred people over right away and sign up for the monthly, which enabled us to, all of our plus stuff, it's all self-hosted. And that, with that money, we're able to self-host it, all of the Grimerica Show, all of our websites, everything now is hosted on, I mean, we don't own the servers, but they're hosted in a place that takes, we have a guy that looked into it to find the place that's the least likely to torch you without at least fighting the government in court.
And there's really no way to censor that RSS feed of a podcast. Like we do still have that sort of last bastion of free speech in the audio RSS feed.
Right. Yeah, you get the learn more about COVID warning occasionally, but yeah, they don't disappear you. It's interesting because we both. I mean, I started a radio program in 2000 actually, and then it dealing with conspiracies and very heavy into 9/11. A year later, just that took over the show, and then different radio stations, terrestrial radio stations, doing this kind of content, and talking about all of these things that we're now living through. 20 years later, and you guys have gone on the same journey, starting in 2013, I know, but just talk to me a little bit about how that feels, where everything, I mean, I have to be honest, when I was talking to people 20 years ago about, there's going to be the emergence of a medical industrial tyranny, and there's going to be a cashless society and digital currency and all of this, I don't know that I bought into it. I just thought, well, this is interesting. But this can't happen. And here we are. And now it's not conspiracy anymore. It's tomorrow's headlines. Having gone through a similar journey, I know. Talk to me how that feels.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes, to be honest. I struggle almost on a regular basis to try and stay positive about what's happening, because for once it wasn't just talking about something that wasn't really directly affecting you. Now this is starting to affect everybody in their personal lives. Like for the first time, besides 9/11 having a direct effect on some people, and of course an indirect effect with the Patriot Act and all that happened. But during COVID, it was different because this was now affecting my family and my friends and everybody in our country and the world. And, if you follow the official data, and see the media lying about it, it's hard. It can be very dark, when you see what they're saying and what we actually see when we just go one layer deep into the data. So for me, it's sort of a struggle to stay. And we've talked about this so much on the show about having to stay positive and manifest our, a better future and not get stuck in that doom scrolling of what's really happening in the world. So for me, that's kind of my personal, emotional struggle constantly. Darren's kind of handles it a little bit differently.
Well, I don't know. It was kind of like, as you were going through it, there was a bunch of different stuff. I mean, I was probably later than most of the conspiracy side of stuff. I mean, I've always had a major problem with authority. My whole life, that's just been a thing, and from school to cops when I got older to the government. Now the government being the seemingly end opponent. But after, because we were even late to 9/11. We didn't start the show as we weren't going to get into conspiracies. That was like a whole level of controversy we weren't going to entertain. And then, we were doing conspiracies. And then, now people say we're on the front of the culture war, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. I would call it more of like the rebellion at this point. I don't know what it is. It's just we're getting steamrolled. But at the same time, the years through COVID have been the most successful of my life. We've been able to grow different things from leaps and bounds, and personally, things are going great, and interrelationally, and so, and and he's just seen the all of it was a real clear sign on just how weak the competitive pool is. I mean, it made me, I'm optimistic about it all. I mean, I was having a conversation today with the lady at the post office because now the regular people are kind of be like, hey man, do you think we're going to run out of food? I mean, this is what happened to me at the post office today when I go to check the PO box. They're like, hey, you think we're going to run out of food? And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not going to run out of food. I know that. What do you mean? And she's like, well, because this is the post office in the Shoppers Drug Mart. I don't know what the equivalent will be in the States, but
Walgreens.
Yeah, like a Walgreens. So anyway, and then, they just start asking me questions about the shelves being empty and it being weird about this and weird about that. So it's kind of finally hitting the
mainstream,
the mainstream. And she's a little less mainstream than most for sure, but it's starting to sink in. And that's the same thing I said is, I mean, if you're paying attention, if you're trying, if you're just not watching TV all day, all night, or playing video games or some other bullshit, the competition has never been weaker. I mean, it's literally, and people say it's harder to get ahead. I think it's the complete opposite. I think it's never been easier because the level of insecurity and competence and entitlement is at an all-time high. And just especially if you're younger, I mean, if you're in your 20s, if you're in your mid-20s, 30s, there's just less of you. There's just, we're hitting that labor shortage. I mean, it's just like across all sectors, the future I don't think has ever been brighter for people who
have some initiative
who have some initiative. That being said, I don't know that the future's ever been darker for the rest of the herd. And we're stuck in a system where the herd gets to decide my fate, which I really didn't think was a problem even 4 years ago. And now I'm like, man, a 30 you guys would have put my ass in a cap. 30 and another 30 want to come take my guns. And, I'm not okay with either of those things. And, I could just see where it started, I've separated myself from the mob so much that I have to start to fear its legislative power. If the votes matter for best case scenario, the vote counts. Best case scenario is they're actually counting the votes, and that's how they're figuring out who's running the place. But all of these people are just so manipulatable by whatever they put on the television, which for anyone who's been paying any like low level of attention, not even like a lot, just a little bit. If you've been paying a little bit of attention for the last 3 years, it's abundantly clear that they'll just lie to you about anything at any time to get the reactions out of you that they want. And it's to the point where they clearly don't even care that people like us exist, because we're just not kicking up enough shit to stop the boat. You know, it's like the people on the Titanic that are like, hey man, there's a bunch of icebergs up there, and everyone's like, shut the fuck up, man, we're partying.
Yeah, they are
People
increasingly
are like, it don't matter, it's unsinkable. And then, you know,
they are increasingly brazen and audacious in their and they don't even, as you say, they don't even try and cover up. They are completely transparent at this point. They don't try and cover up their lies. It's just like throwing down the gauntlet. What are you going to do about it? You know, they feel so emboldened in large measure because of a totally, well, the news, the legacy media has totally abandoned. It's just non-functional. We have a non-functioning news media, so they can do whatever they want. We'll take another time out and come back. More of my conversation with Darren Grimes and Graham Dunlop, co-hosts of Grimerica and Grimerica Outlawed. What would it feel like to reclaim your health, your vitality, to sleep deeply, to live fully, to address health at the root, at the cellular level, so that your body can detect damage where you have it? Imagine living younger, longer, having the energy to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Discomfort fading away. ASEA Redox Supplement harnesses the power of your body to heal itself, giving you the ability to power your potential. This is one of the most profound health, athletic, and anti-aging discoveries of our lifetime, and we need the world to know about it. If you want to learn more about ASEA, visit strangeplanet.teamasea.com, strangeplanet.teamasea.com, and be sure to text or call my colleague and friend Lynn at 443-254-6024, 443-254-6024 to order or for additional information. ASEA Redox Supplement. It's truly wellness redefined. All right, let's raise a little consciousness here and maybe get into some more positivity. Talk to me about free energy. You both believe that we are on the cusp, perhaps, of some new revolutionary, disruptive energy technology?
I'm agnostic to that personally. Graham could speak to that better. I can just say that people who I respect a lot, and who, if they told me something was true 99 times out of 100, I would believe them. And then not only that, there's some of the smartest motherfuckers I know or have ever met are all in. So it's hard not to get caught up in the excitement. Now, Graham has actually gone through and watched all the videos, so he could speak to it a little bit better. I don't know. It's a little over our heads, so.
Yeah. I mean, this is completely over my head, but I mean, I can just explain what my opinion is of it, or, you know, what I think's happening. But I think we're going to enter into an implosive energy revolution. And this is going back to Randall Carlson again and his partner, Bradley Young. And I mean, there's a conspiratorial aspect to it as well. I mean, the inventor of this technology has met with Randall for weeks and weeks. They've gone over all this stuff. They're putting out a bunch of videos coming out very soon, like probably, you know, HowTube is going to have a series of videos, probably 15 videos on explaining this in detail. But I mean, he's come up with, you know, the resonant frequency of the elements, and he's talked about how to create this technology based on, I mean, for you and your listeners, the genesis story of this is going to be incredible, perfect. It's like based on ancient wisdom and the Vajra. So it's bringing back this ancient wisdom into our world through this technology that can, what they say, and I've seen videos of this working. I mean, the same videos I think Randall has seen. They have this way that they can ionize this water, then extract these plasmoids out of it. They bubble it, extract plasmoids, send it through this, what they call the thunderstorm generator, which creates this energy, and it cleans out this exhaust as well. So it's a way that they can basically It's not free energy, but once you get it going and it gets to temperature, then you can set this thing on and it'll clean the exhaust and create like at least double efficiency on these things. So you can retrofit cars, you can retrofit all those Chandra generators in Africa, like thousands and thousands of those generators that are just coughing out pollution. So you can retrofit those. I mean, he's talking about planetary power plants. I mean, it goes everything to space travel, all kinds of stuff. And this presentation will show all that. So, you know, we've been sort of friends with Randall, and there's a trust factor there. So we've been sort of in touch with these guys on what they're doing. And I mean, I think it's going to happen here. And Joe Rogan had them on. And I think it's fine for me to say this. Most people that are following it kind of know. And he hasn't released the episode yet. He wanted to vet it a little bit further. So of course this inventor.
It's been a while now, dude.
It's been a while now. So
he's been over a month. It has to be over a month now.
Yeah.
So he's sitting on it.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's the only Rogan episode that's been recorded and not released.
And so Randall Carlson was on with this
Malcolm Bendall, the inventor.
Bendall.
Yep.
Okay.
On Rogan, and they're sitting on it.
And what did they bring? Not a prototype, but they brought schematics. They brought some sort of a demonstration.
Yeah, not a physical demonstration, but Randall said Joe was pretty. He had to bring him back quite a bit to the technology because he was trying to vet Malcolm out. Like there's been some mainstream smearing of this guy about his past. So Joe kept sort of trying to vet this kind of thing, and Randall kept trying to bring him back to the technology. But so we'll see. I mean, the weird thing is, does this increase the exposure in a way? Because it's like, why isn't Joe doing this? You know, or is Joe protecting Randall from this? Like, because people have been accusing him of maybe being scammed, that kind of thing. Also, you know, Joe could just be. He might not want to put his hat on anything until he does vet it and he realizes if this is true or not. But I mean, the reason why Malcolm is connecting with Randall on this is because Malcolm's been following all of Randall's sacred geometry, and this whole thing is based on sacred geometry. I mean, he's got time involved and the matter and the ether and all the dimensions of the apparatus is based on sacred geometry. So for us who's interested in all these things, it's like the way you would want a new technology to come into the world, you know?
So, assuming that Joe Rogan doesn't release this episode anytime soon, what's the next step? How are they going to get this out to the public?
Well, I think you're going to see all the videos on HowTube. That's where Randall's been putting a lot of his work, his educational work. HowTube is kind of, I think, for instructional videos and stuff like that. So you're going to see them come out on HowTube very soon. And then, you know, I'm not sure about the communication plan from there. I mean, there is some pretty big players getting involved as well, and it seems like this is moving forward. And my personal opinion is that this is out of the bag. The cat's out of the bag, and it can't be put back in now. And I think that they're already aware of this. Like, it's not like you can just chop off one guy's head and this thing goes away. I mean, he wants to put it out in open source. Not open source, but what's the other word when you just throw it out there?
I was going to say open source. I didn't know there was another term.
Well, maybe open source, but he wants to put it out. He's got all his notes and stuff out there for people to see, and he's getting it out there so that it can't be kind of squashed. And you know, Stanley Meyer's car, right? The car that ran on water. It's very similar to that. Not very similar, but there is a part of it that's similar. So he says that Stanley Meyer was actually generating plasmoids in that little thing that he was using. So This is a little bit different because it doesn't run on water, but water recycles and helps it run on gas, something like that. So I think the government's already, you know, when Randall teased this on Joe Rogan, the government started talking about their over unity and their Lawrence Livermore labs. All of a sudden, all this stuff came out about the government's, you know,
Chinese spy balloons, and like all that was literally like that night they're shooting down UFOs like a week later.
Oh, so the big distraction.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what it was, but it was just like weird because the mainstream media was talking about strange propulsion that we don't understand. Like fucking a week after my buddy's podcast won't get released on Joe Rogan. I don't know why. I mean, I've heard Joe have some pretty crazy episodes released on that feed of his, and I'm not judging. I have crazier ones. I guarantee it. We've interviewed dudes from McDonald's that were talking about aliens from Planet Serpo. But so Joe's had some crazy stuff. To not have this one on because it's, it
Yeah.
seems
Too big, maybe. It's too big for him. Um,
yeah, you could at this point you might just not want to upset the apple cart. You got a pretty good thing going. I mean, for 100 million, I could shut the fuck up too.
maybe he should get on Russell Brand. He's a loose cannon. He'll put it out there.
He's been doing great work lately.
I would say that intersection is inevitable. It's just a matter of time.
How do you guys feel about Jordan Peterson? Dr. Jordan Peterson wanting to start, or he has already. I think he's already sort of filed all the paperwork. I think it's now an actual corporate entity and so forth. He wants to create an organization to oppose the World Economic Forum. I think he's registered it in London. He's brought in Bjorn Lornborg, who's kind of the sensible environmentalist. Any thoughts on that?
Darren, go ahead.
Well, I like Jordan personally. I don't know how much we could trust him. But I like him, and anything that's pushing back in the against the WF, I think is a good thing. I'm pushing back against the WEF as hard as I can. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend for the time being, at least. And Jordan has been, arguably one of the most inspirational people in my personal journey, having read all his books and seen a lot of his videos. It's hard for me to put him in that camp as being evil. That's not
Controlled
to say
op or something.
yeah, that's not to say it can't happen. It's just that I'm in too deep to see it myself. But personally, I have nothing but respect for. I mean, he cries a bit much. He's a bit much sometimes, for sure. But he's just a little dork who got the weight of the world thrown on his shoulders. I mean, I could barely handle that. And he's just a little dude who's a psychiatrist who grew up in nowhere's town, Alberta, and was probably like picked on most of his life until he became a teacher, and then is now like one of the most famous people in the world. That's just can't go anywhere without, probably getting mostly positive attention, but at the same time having the ire of the empire seemingly everywhere he goes. I don't know how I would handle that.
Yeah, that's a bit much for anybody. Yeah. Where do you want to go next? Let's talk. You want to talk about UFOs and CE5s making contact?
Yeah, well, I mean, my little pet theory about what's happening with these objects that were getting shot down and UFOs is, I'm not sure about the blue beam aspects so far, how far that's going to go, but I do think they're going to use these because they're calling them objects now for some reason instead of UAPs. They were supposed to come out with this new terminology, but the mainstream couldn't help but specifically calling them objects. And I think my conspiratorial brain goes to like a prediction of maybe they're going to use this to say, well, we reversed some technology here, or we found a technology in here that we don't know who's made it, but it's an exotic technology that needs to be protected. We need to protect everybody. It's dangerous. I mean, I think they could use this shooting down these objects. I mean, we haven't heard what the wreckage is yet. Shooting down these objects to maybe try and keep a lid on this new energy. They can call it whatever, fusion or cold fusion, or they're splitting hydrogen in this technology or something. And we gotta be careful about this. We can't have people making this stuff in their basement. We got to regulate it. We got to control it. So I feel like they're going to keep those little downed objects in their back pocket for some extracurricular narratives.
So you believe that these, whatever they were, that were drifting for days across North America, and they spent, $400,000 on a missile to shoot down one of these. You think that they could be of extraterrestrial origin?
No, I don't think so. No, I think they're from the breakaway civilization, like Dolan would say. Whatever sort of supranational, international organization is flying these things around. I think they're man-made. Probably. I don't think we'd be shooting down ET stuff. But since we've talked back in 2013, 14, I mean, I've done some CE5s in Calgary and we've had success. We've seen lots of things. But I just don't know if those things are actually ET or not either. I mean, I just want to keep an open mind a little bit. But when we go out there with love in our hearts and a good intention and we meditate and try and see stuff, we do see stuff. So it's very strange. Big flash bulbs in the sky. We saw some what we called like flybys of like just a silent light in airspace flying over from one side to the next. Some interesting spinning lights and stuff like that. It really fascinating. So I've seen enough to know that, hey, we can manifest stuff, but do we want to? Like, then I started thinking, do we want to make contact with anything, right?
And Darren, what do you think of? I mean, have you? I don't know. I get the sense as the skeptic that this is not something that you want necessarily any part of. You know, summoning UFOs and.
Well, I like the woods.
You like the woods? You go
I've
along
seen
for the walk.
a lot of stars. I mean, I just don't think they're aliens or ships. I just think they're like stars and stuff that, you know, there's night phenomena that probably we used to be pretty comfortable with, well, you know, a couple 100 years ago, and now it's just that we just don't look at the sky enough to just really, because when I go out and I look at the stars and I'm not trying to summon shit, I'm just looking at the stars, I'm enjoying, and I'll see stuff, the same sort of stuff. I don't know about the flash bulbs, but I'll definitely see the stuff shooting all over and tons of satellites, and they're going in directions they're supposedly not supposed to go in because they're not supposed to orbit north-south. But I just like, you know, I don't know. It's never been my thing. Just never been my thing. I've seen a UFO and I still didn't give a fuck. I just
Is there friction with you guys? Do you get frustrated with each other because
no,
not over that kind of stuff, mostly just over business stuff, like stupid stuff too. Like he's like
this is my job now,
and
like
I'm
full
not.
time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, it's an interesting dynamic that you two have. Interesting chemistry. It served you well.
Yeah, I like his opinion on stuff. I go to him for opinions all the time. So it's just we have different views on like ETs and UFOs and stuff like that. But it's funny because as you know, you talked about the transition going in towards the last few years, like he's become more conspiratorial in some ways than me about certain things. So, you know, he's not always the skeptic. Sometimes I'm skeptical about certain things as well.
Darren Grimes, Graham Dunlop, co-hosts of Grimerica and Grimerica Outlawed, Grimerica.com. This is going to air in a couple of weeks, but I don't know. Look ahead a couple of months. Do you have a big show on the horizon that you want to promote, or another? You mentioned some events. Anything that you want to promote that's going to happen? Let's say, I don't know, towards the end of April.
Well, we have an event over at contactatthecabin.com. We have an event in April in Utah, the Star event, April 20th, 24th. We have it's a 420 event. There'll probably be some weed flying around. We have the Randall Carlson Scablands tour, May 15th to 20th. And then we have another Randall Carlson Montana tour, September 18th to 23rd. And then we got another event in Canada for Canadians who can't get their unvaccinated asses into the USA yet. We're doing a Canadian event in Invermere, BC at the Hot Springs. And that's November 9th to 12th this year as well. And the only other one I could say for sure, but I mean, that's all that's on sale now. So I'll leave it at that.
I think that's enough. My Lord.
Yeah. And then the other thing I should mention is we have almost 100 audiobooks for sale on Audible and iTunes and all that. That Graham's narrated. I wrote a couple of them. Most of them are, you know, Blavatsky stuff, Manly P. Hall stuff that's just sort of been forgotten in the public domain. We've been trying to get out as much of that out to the world on audio as possible. And people can find all that at adultbrain.ca.
Couple books that Richard might like because he had a show called The Conspiracy Show back then. Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robison about the secret societies and all that. That's on there. And then Nesta Webster's Secret Societies and Subversive Movements. That's also on there. So we've got a couple classic conspiracies as well. Also, Ted Kaczynski's Unabomber Manifesto's on there. So a lot of ancient wisdom, a lot of kind of old conspiracy books as well.
Fantastic. You guys are doing amazing work. So prolific. Congratulations, and my best wishes for future success. 10 years it's been since we talked. We won't leave it 10 years again for the next time, but thank you so much, both of you. Great meeting you again.
Thanks.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.